Good morning. Hopefully after this absence, this isn't too much of a surprise to hear Bob's garden back in its not exactly full bloom, but beginning to bud. It's definitely the springtime. We see a lot more animals in the garden. And there are a lot more birds about all day, really, but particularly the early mornings, of which this is not. It's gone 7 o'clock. And the evenings. Stood in the newly refurbished greenhouse, and I'm surrounded by the things that I've been planting. We've been busy. I'm looking around me. I have attempted to propagate some cannas that have been neglected and frankly abused for about 3 years in the same pot. And I'm looking at them now. I took 2 cannas which had obviously grown 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. So I've now split them up into 15 different plants. And the way I did that was to dig them out, and it was hard to dig them out because they were root bound, pot bound, is that the word? And I dug them out and I've split them, so wherever there was a shoot on the root, on the rhizome, I just sort of split it in half, just using my hands, and then I've replanted them into pots with some compost. Cannas are very hungry plants, and they'll take any food and water as long as it's well drained. They don't like to sit in water, but you can water them and feed them. And I will say that I think at least 2 or 3 of them have started to shoot in the greenhouse. Next to that, Mrs. Bob's garden has been busy with some flowers, things like sweet peas and calendulas and sweet basil. And I think, are they lupins? I can't read what that says. Dahlias. And some of those have started to put their first leaves out already, which is very exciting. I say refused, to buy any more seeds this year, because we buy seeds every year. We've got loads left over. So I've planted the following vegetables, and these are not really all been planted at exactly the right time. But here we go. Beetroot, lettuce, salad onions, cabbage, Savoy cabbage, purple sprouting broccoli, which, as I said last year, takes a year, so that won't be ready to harvest till this time next year. French beans, dwarf, and carrots. And I just thought, as I got the seeds, and I got the compost and a greenhouse, I'd plant them, and we'll see what happens. So that's what I did. It is a bit cooler in here than I might expect. I'm just closing the window, that's what that noise is. I think I need to get one of those automated window openers and closers. But I'm very proud of this greenhouse. It was a bit of a mess, missing panes, has been since we moved in, which is close to 2 years ago. And over the break, while I have been away, not recording the podcast, stepping out of the greenhouse now, by the way, I've done it up. So we've got some replacement glass. I've re-clipped all the windows back in correctly, because a lot of the clips were in backwards, and that's why the glass kept sliding about. And it was in pretty good nick. The door was beyond repair, but I've just replaced that with a big sheet of sort of insulated plastic stuff that was previously on the polytunnel. The polytunnel, which was a favourite place of mine to go and sit was utterly destroyed in the big storm that came. The same storm that took down a sort of 25-metre cracked willow in the garden, which I'm still chopping up. It also took a few panes out of the greenhouse, so I replaced those. So the allotment now has no polytunnel, but it has a newly refurbished greenhouse, which is actually more manageable. And I've also recovered a plastic greenhouse that I'm using to store stuff in. That is missing a few panes. The storm shook it to pieces. But otherwise, the system is working well. I'm not sure if I'm going to get new sheet for the polytunnel yet. We'll see how we get on. So I'm looking now at my raised beds that are not raised. They're sort of frames. And they're doing, on the whole, very well. There is one, I've filled them with my own compost. Not actually my own compost, garden compost, but which I have made. So some of them are still from last year with a lot of shop-bought compost and topsoil. Some of them are a mixture, and some of them have got entirely our own composting, which is very, very pleasing. Compost is something that has been working pretty well. You have to be careful how you create it, because there is one bed where I obviously haven't let the compost sit enough, or it's never got hot enough in the first place, which I think is the problem. It was in for a long time, and I've put that out, and it's basically just turned into pure grass. The amount of green stuff growing in it still is remarkable. So I think that's going to have to be dug up, and I might even try to recompost it. I'm a little bit worried about infecting the rest of my compost with whatever's growing in this one. But when you look at it, we've got 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 frames, no dig areas. Thank you to whoever it was on Instagram that suggested I do that at the start of this journey, because it has been another great success of Bob's garden. So of the 10 beds, only one of them is a bit of a mess with weeds, so I'm not sure what I'll do with that. But anyway, the only thing I need to do this year now is build some hoods for these raised beds and get some mesh sort of netting so that I can keep the pests off. Because last year I had 2 very successful beds full of brassicas, and after a trip up to the Highlands and Islands of that wonderful country Scotland, I came back to find not only a jungle on the allotment, but that all the local nature had been using my brassicas to eat for their dinners. And it looked like a nuclear blast had gone across the top of them. All that was left were the skeletons, and all the leaves were all gone. You'll be pleased to hear that the chickens are doing rather tremendously. They're still not allowed out, according to DEFRA, which is problematic, because they do want to come out and roam. But we've got to look after them and do the right thing. We don't want bird flu everywhere, so we're minimising the risk of that, and we're keeping them in. We are still selling the eggs around the village. Once a week one of us will go out and drop off eggs at whoever's asked, and they're very popular. I do occasionally get accosted in the local post office and told, make sure I get eggs this week, because we don't produce enough eggs that we can service all the people who want to eat them. And it's quite interesting. There's a bloke we sell eggs to, and he works on a chicken farm, and he says, I won't eat the eggs that we produce. I'll only eat yours. Apparently he has ferrets, and they like to give the ferret an egg before they take the ferret out ferreting for rabbits, so that it's got some energy but it's still hungry and will catch and shoo rabbits out correctly. But apparently one day, not long ago, he gave the ferret an egg from where he works, and the ferret turned his nose up at it, and he decided to stop eating them himself. If it's not good enough for a ferret, he said, it's not good enough for me. So that's what he says. Until tomorrow.